We're halfway through the year, and I've got my picks for the best movies, some of my least favorite movies, and some of the great performances of the year so far, right now. Hello everybody, and welcome to my recap of the year in movies so far. We are halfway through 2023, believe it or not. If you're in the US, I hope you're enjoying a long July 4th holiday. Isn't it great when it falls in the middle of the week and you get like 5-6 days off? And looking at 2023 so far, I have to say there have been some standout movies, but overall it's been kind of a bumpy year. There are so many of the big movies, especially the big summer movies, that I was hoping to really enjoy, really love. Bringing Michael Keaton back for Batman, one last Indiana Jones film. And while I don't think that any of them personally were disasters, a lot of this big summer blockbuster stuff just kind of keeps hitting this middle, like, it's fine, it's good section, and there haven't been a whole lot of standouts. Having said that, that doesn't mean that there aren't standout films that have come out this year, so we're going to recap some of those that are my favorite, a few that I didn't really like so much, and then I wanted to spotlight some individual performances, even in movies that I didn't like, as we've gone through the year so far. I will say that I have a lot of hope for the back end of the year and the back end of this summer because it's been a bit up and down for the first half. Briefly, before I get to the things that I loved, there are a few movies that I've already seen that haven't been released yet, so I'm not including them on this list. These would be movies and performances that would at least be contenders to be on this list if they had been released. One of those movies is Theater Camp, which actually opens in a couple of weeks. I saw it out of Sundance virtually and really enjoyed it.
You guys are so talented, so unbelievable. This will break you. This will fully destroy you.
Congratulations on being the most talented kids at camp.
Another one is a film called Scrapper, which opens in August, a very small British film.
We were just making sure that all of these bikes were road safety, and we were just walking by. Oh, yours isn't, by the way.
Then there's Sometimes I Think About Dying, starring Daisy Ridley. That's going to be released by Oscilloscope in the fall. There's also a movie called Mutt, which does not have a release date as of right now. It's going to be released by Strand Releasing. And then Fair Play on Netflix, a really fascinating deep dive about a toxic relationship that's complicated by gender norms, power norms, financial norms. I really think this is an interesting movie. So those are all smaller films that I think you should keep an eye out for later on this year. There are also a few films that I enjoyed but fell just shy of my 10 favorite movies of the year so far. One of those movies is Missing, part of this Screen Life genre, done from the same team that helped to bring you the film Searching. And like Searching, I also enjoyed this movie. They found a fun way to sort of remix the concept for a new adventure. Also, Evil Dead Rise, a movie that I didn't really expect much out of. It was supposed to go to streaming. It wasn't a fantastic film, but I thought it was really solid.
That's it. Come on now.
Do it for Mom and Dad.
Extraction 2 on Netflix. This could be a sequel that I could argue is perhaps better than the original, and really the upping of the stakes and the ante as far as the execution of the action scenes. I think that Chris Hemsworth is a really good lead in this series. A couple script issues that kept it out of the top 10, but it's a great watch if you love action movies.
It's gonna be a rough landing, so hold on tight. Figure it out later, mate.
And then Creed 3, which I also enjoyed. I keep saying that I don't need more Creed films, but I thought that this one was pretty good. Michael B. Jordan did a great job behind the camera. Obviously, Jonathan Majors, there's some complication there, and that's all playing out. We'll see what the end game is on that. But overall, I thought that Creed 3 may be an unnecessary film, but one that I enjoyed.
Dame treated me more like family than your two kids ever did in this house. And you took that away from me. None of this would have happened if it wasn't for you.
So let's get to my 10 favorite movies of the year so far, and I'm not really in a position where I want to rank these because I feel like if I rank them now, then at the end of the year, if there's some movies that have changed position, it starts this whole thing of like, well, why did you put it at number 7 here and number 3 here, whatever. So these are in alphabetical order, my 10 favorite movies of 2023 to this point, and the first one that I want to point out is Air. It's this trend that we see this year of movies that are nominally based on products. This one I thought was, yes, about the quest to land Michael Jordan at Nike, but I thought it had a very human element. It was about who these people were, why it was so important for this to happen, and how they were able to appeal personally, not just to Michael Jordan, but to his family in order to land this deal. Is this a corporate movie about corporate filmmaking? Well, yeah, it comes to you from Amazon, but at the same time, I thought this could have been a very dry, kind of by the numbers sort of thing. I think that Ben Affleck did a great job behind the camera and in front of the camera. Matt Damon is one of our finest actors, and I don't say that sarcastically. Jason Bateman had a great supporting turn, and then Viola Davis, a real standout, playing Michael Jordan's mom. I agree with the decision not to show Michael Jordan because that's not necessarily what the focus of the movie was. It was about this sort of impossible dream that these folks over at Nike had, and overall I just thought that it was a really interesting and enjoyable film.
Once they've built you as high as they possibly can, they're gonna tear you back down. It's the most predictable pattern. We build you into something that doesn't exist, and that means you have to try to be that thing.
Next up is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, which I did not actually catch in theaters, and not many people did, and I think it might be because it is an adaptation of a 50-year-old book that's about a preteen girl who is, going through puberty, and I think a lot of people, honestly myself included, thought, well, there's not going to be much for me to relate to in this movie. But as I was making this list, I went through to watch a few this year that had come out that I felt I should because they got good reviews, etc. And I went back and watched this film. And yes, of course, the subject matter is something that I have not personally gone through in my life, but the characters were made so relatable that even if I can't relate to the actual events that this character is going through, I can relate to the emotions. I can relate to the idea of getting older. I can relate to the idea of feeling like an outsider and looking at your friends and thinking, well, should I be doing that? And that's what I think great films do. They can take something that might be unfamiliar to the viewer and link it to a very human side. I thought the performances were really good in this. Kelly Freeman Craig, who made another great film called The Edge of 17 about a girl in high school, did a great job both on the script side and on the directing side. And I just found this to be a really, and I think a lot of people use this as a kind of term of diminishment, but a really sweet film, well acted, and one that I enjoyed.
If a baby is not conceived, the lining is not needed, and so the blood is released through the vagina. That's menstruation.
My third film is Wes Anderson's newest film, Asteroid City. I don't think that it's Wes Anderson's best film, but it's a film that I very much enjoyed. And I think that he gets a bit of a bad rap because the social media perception of Wes Anderson is that he keeps making the same movie over and over. And that, he has a bag of tricks and he draws from only that bag of tricks. And he definitely does have a distinctive style. There are things that appear in all of his movies, particularly his recent filmography, that on a surface level you could look at and say like, well, he's just doing the same thing over and over again. But what I loved about Asteroid City is he's not just telling this story, he is tackling the concept of story and the form and function of storytelling and authorship and everything else. It's kind of heady stuff. It doesn't all 100% land, but I think that a lot of it lands really well, and it's a movie that kept me interested. Some of his films I do think fall on the more surface level. This one to me had a lot of rich stuff going on underneath it. I liked the characters. I thought it was funny. Of course, it looked beautiful. Production design was amazing. So from a technical standpoint, one of my favorite films of the year. And I think a lot more going on than some people wanted to give it credit for. It's easy to dunk on filmmakers on social media with these kind of surface level generalizations, but I don't think that Wes Anderson got the credit for what he was actually trying to do with this movie.
I don't like the way that guy looked at us.
What guy?
The alien.
Well, how did he look
like
at
we're
us?
doomed.
Maybe we are.
Next up is Blackberry, another one of those movie about the product movies. Now, I've done a little bit of research, and it looks like that there's very little about this film that matches the reality of it, but that's the truth of a lot of these films. The Social Network, in many ways, doesn't match the reality of it, and I think that that's one of the best and most relevant films of the 21st century. There is a disconnection that you have to make at some point, and as a movie, I think that Blackberry works really well, and I think it's actually very relevant to the times that we live in now with the whole streaming revolution and the idea of going all in because you think that you have the next big idea and then realizing that maybe that big idea isn't quite as big as you thought it was, or maybe somebody out there comes up with a better idea, and how do you react to that situation? Of course, we watched Blackberry with the hindsight of history, knowing that it was going to be absolutely wiped off the map by Apple and the iPhone. But I thought that this was a very interesting look at the development, at something that is so cutting edge that you have to really struggle to explain it to somebody at the beginning, and then by the end, you're playing catch up.
We were kind of hoping you'd come in here with an iPhone killer.
I don't need to kill it, because it's going to commit suicide, and it's going to take down the whole singular network with it.
Next up is one of the biggest box office flops of the year, but one of my most fun times in the theater, and that is Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. I did not expect much from this movie. I'm not a huge Dungeons & Dragons guy, but this was just such a great adventure film with a great ensemble, a really funny script, some great action sequences. It was in many ways kind of a throwback to those old adventure movies where you got a little bit of everything. You got a dash of romance, you got a dash of heart, you got some action, you got some comedy. Chris Pine was a great lead. I thought Michelle Rodriguez played well with him. Hugh Grant was a great villain. Really, there wasn't much for me to complain about with Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. I wish it had found more of an audience, but I'm glad that I was part of the audience that was able to find the movie and talk about it on the channel to encourage other people to see it. By the way, if you haven't seen it, I do encourage you to see it. It's streaming right now on Paramount+.
What madness is this?
My favorite action movie of the year was John Wick Chapter 4. This could have gone very wrong. Too much of a good thing, potentially, because it's a 3-hour almost movie that really is nonstop action from beginning to end. And if they hadn't been inventive with what they did in the movie, then it would have just been kind of a sensory overload. But they changed up a lot of things, and they had ambition. They weren't just saying, like, we're going to use this character in Keanu Reeves, and we're just going to make, another John Wick movie that's pretty much like the other John Wick movies. They kept putting him in bigger and worse situations. The climax with the stairs and going up the stairs and down the stairs, it was like a live action cartoon, and I think they knew that and they leaned into it. The reality of the John Wick series has barely been a thing. Maybe in the first movie. They've all gotten increasingly outrageous since then. I went with the crazy nature of this film. I think it still had that emotional core. Keanu is somehow perfectly suited for this role, no pun intended. And again, the action scenes in this film are so well choreographed and executed. When you look at action filmmaking right now, it's this and Mission Impossible for me as far as what is possible in the genre. Really, on the other end of the spectrum is a movie that I delayed this video so that I would have a chance to go see. It's a movie called Past Lives, which is the writing and directing debut from Celine Song. It came out of Sundance with a lot of buzz. It made its way around the film festival circuit, and now it is opening around the nation. I think it's currently just under 1,000 theaters and plans to continue expanding, and if it is playing near you, this is a very small movie, but it is a movie that I wholeheartedly recommend that you go see. It's about two friends in South Korea who are separated as children and then find each other 2+ decades down the road. And it really examines how the lives of two people can completely diverge, and yet that connection remains the same. And when you reconnect with these people, that conflict between the person that they were, the person that they are, the person that you've become, are you compatible? What does it say about the life that you've chosen and the choices that you've made? It really does go into a lot of deep questions, but also doesn't feel the need to provide easy answers. It's very introspective, and I liked that about it. I think that if you were going to provide an answer to some of those questions, then it would seem almost too easy. In a way, this is about the complicated lives that we all lead, but told through this very simple story of two and really three people.
Are you attracted to him?
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't think so.
Next up is one of the only summer movies that's actually delivered so far this year, maybe the only one for me that really met those expectations and delivered a solid movie. And of course, that would be Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I loved the first movie. It is a tall order to provide a sequel that in any way compares to it, and yet Across the Spider-Verse is able to integrate itself to that movie. A lot of times with sequels, you sit there going like, well, why did you need to make another one? Or, oh, this is just a repeat of what I've already seen. I love the way that it ties back to the first film and how it leads into the next film whenever that's released, supposedly next spring, although there have been rumblings now that it's not going to make that release date. And not just on a story level, I love what they did with Miles and Gwen and everybody in the film, but again on an animation level. This is a movie that came out of nowhere to win the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, and yet still is trying to revolutionize the form. It's an outstanding looking movie, and the different kinds of animation and the blending of those animations is unlike anything else that I've ever seen. So not only is it satisfying narratively and on a character level, but also technically, it's one of the best all-around movies of the year. And I'm so glad that it actually delivered, because looking back on the summer so far, if this movie had just been kind of okay, then this would most definitely be one of the most disappointing summers in recent memory, although maybe it already is.
Football stations, drop what you're doing and stop Spider-Man. Wait, mute?
Next up is a documentary on Apple TV Plus called Still, a Michael J. Fox movie. I am a little more prone to love this movie because I was born in 1983. Back to the Future was basically a sacred text for me growing up. And I love the approach with this movie because it is driven by Michael J. Fox's own words as he recounts his life story. You have archived clips of his work in the past, Family Ties, Back to the Future, his film work, his other sitcom work, but you also have these recreations that kind of fill in the gaps. So it's almost like there's a camera that has been sent into the past to show you these things that he's telling you about the early days of his disease and seeing the effects that it was having on his body. Yes, you hate to see the struggle that he's going through, but his spirit and the fact that he's sort of throwing this disease the middle finger and saying like, I'm not going to let you take away my life and I'm not going to let you defeat me. Yes, it's hard and I'm going to be angry about it and I'm going to be sad about it, but I'm also going to keep fighting. It's such an inspirational story. He's not defined by having Parkinson's. He's also defined by a legacy of TV and film work, and you learn a lot about that as well. So I think that this was a very unique documentary. I liked the form of it. I liked the story of it, and I think that it's very emotional in a happy way, not just in a sad way. If you have Apple TV Plus or you have access to this documentary, then that's one that I would also, of course, recommend.
There's a period of time that I was king of the world.
Golf stance again, don't lock out.
And I was playing a part. And then that was worth feeling sorry for.
Finally, on my top 10 for 2023 is a movie that technically came out in 2022, but I wasn't able to see it until this year. And that's the latest from Japanese animator Makoto Shinkai. The movie is called Suzume. Makoto Shinkai also made Weathering with You and Your Name, which is a massive global hit. I've talked many times before about the fact that I am still catching up on anime, and I'm now seeing these films more and more frequently when they first come out, in addition to going back and catching some that I've missed. And this is one of the most unique animated films, anime or otherwise, that I've ever seen. I don't think that it quite had the emotional weight for me of Your Name, but at the same time, the fact that Makoto Shinkai does things in this movie that just happen and they're so crazy, but the movie's just like, well, you're just gonna have to go with it because we're not gonna stop to explain it. And then like you get emotional over like this relationship between this girl and a chair. Of course, it's not really a chair, but that's the work that the movie does. You don't roll your eyes and want to walk out because it's asking you to invest emotion into this character that is a chair. Instead, you care about who they are and why they're a chair, and you don't want them to be a chair, or maybe they should be a chair. And there's, a cat running around, and you're like, oh, what's up with this cat? Oh, what's happening with this? There's so much happening in this movie that on its surface, if I were to describe it to you, would just seem weird, and yet it has such depth. And then the turn that it takes, and when you realize the nature of what's going on, again, it's something that you're not really looking for because you're kind of so fantastical over here that when it takes this real world stuff over here and adds it to the story, it really just serves to make that story much more emotional. And the depth of emotion in this film is really great. I love the animation in this film. It's a beautiful film. I thought that the story was really well executed. If you haven't seen Suzume, I highly recommend it because it is definitely offbeat, but worth it.
人の心の消えた寂しい場所に後ろ戸は開くんだ。後ろ戸からは災いが出てくる。
I've got a lot more to break down about 2023 coming up, but before we get to that, I want to thank the sponsors for this show. This episode is brought to you by AG1, a daily foundational nutrition supplement. We are in the dog days of summer, which means it's a time for gathering with friends and also a perfect time to make sure that you're firing on all cylinders. You want to have energy for all those summer activities. I drink AG1 every morning, and it's because my days are getting crazier. The channel keeps me busy. I'm planning a wedding. The last thing I want to think about is taking a bunch of different supplements, and it's important for me to keep things on track when it comes to my immune system, gut health, and so much more. I've struggled in the past with keeping to a routine, much less trying to remember which supplements I need to take and what amounts which days, but drinking AG1 is as simple as drinking a glass of water. It's 1 scoop of powder mixed with water once a day, And that's it. Each scoop of AG1 is packed with vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients when I'm home. And I also have some single serving AG1 travel packs so I never have to miss a day, even when I'm on the go. It's just that simple. If you want to take ownership of your health, try AG1 today and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Just go to drinkag1.com/Dan. That's drinkag1.com/Dan. Check it out. This episode is brought to you by Mint Mobile. You know, one frustration nearly every mobile customer shares is trying to figure out just what's on your plan. I was working with my mom to try to sort out her mobile plan for weeks, trying to figure out which plan saves her the most money, and it was an absolute mess, and she ended up switching over to Mint Mobile because it's simple. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, no binding contracts or ridiculous promotions, no charges that you won't find out about until you get your bill. Every plan at Mint Mobile is straightforward, easy to understand, and delivers exactly what you pay for. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network, and you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone number along with your existing contacts. Get premium wireless from just $15 a month with no unexpected surprises at mintmobile.com/Murrell. That's mintmobile.com/Murrell. Seriously, you'll make your wallet very happy at mintmobile.com/Murrell. So those are my 10 favorite movies of the year so far. Let's talk briefly about a few that were amongst my least favorite of the year. I thought Shazam! Fury of the Gods was a movie that just felt completely phoned in. I respect David F. Sandberg as a director, but this one just didn't feel like it made the case for why this movie should have been made, and I think looking at the box office results, there didn't really seem to be much of an audience for it anyway. It felt like superhero movie the movie, and just nothing really special or stand out for me. Robert Rodriguez's Hypnotic was a movie. I don't know if it wants me to laugh at it, but I definitely was laughing at it. He is a director that tends to go off the deep end a little bit, and you're just going to have to decide whether to go with it or not go with it. I did not go with it, and I thought that it was a pretty ridiculous film, and I don't think intentionally.
How is it that you know so much about these hypnotics?
Because I am one.
Knights of the Zodiac, yikes. This was a bad movie. It was an adaptation of a very popular anime series, but something was lost in that translation and adaptation. It looked terrible. The performances weren't particularly good. This was a passion project that took many, many years to make, but I don't think that it was worth the wait.
What if I told you Sienna here is the reincarnation of the goddess Athena, and you are destined to become one of her guardian knights?
The biggest blown potential of any movie this year was 65, starring Adam Driver, who fights dinosaurs on prehistoric Earth. This could easily have been just a really fun, simple action film, but they weigh it down with a story that you've seen a million times before. I wanted to like this movie so much. It was such a low bar for entry, and yet they didn't do anything interesting with the premise.
Emergency transpondence! This is Charter 3703! Our ship has been hit and is going down!
But the worst movie that I've seen by far this year is a movie that I think I scolded not just the movie makers for making, but myself for going to see, which is Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, the public domain IP exploitation of everyone's favorite red-shirted bear. And again, you can do a movie like this if you come up with an interesting take, but this movie looked like garbage. The acting was terrible. Literally the only reason that it existed was for the buzz factor of making the Winnie the Pooh horror movie because the rights went into public domain. And it worked. The movie did better than so many much more worthy independent horror films. I was part of that system. The curiosity drove me to see it. It really is a piece of garbage. I don't usually say that about movies, but there is nothing good about this movie. I think it was made cynically, a very low effort production. There are apparently more IP movies coming from this studio and this filmmaker. Hopefully they'll be better than this one, but this was easily the worst movie I've seen this year, and please don't feed into this. I'm sorry that I did, honestly. All right, so before we go, I want to talk finally about some of my favorite performances of the year, and they weren't necessarily always in my favorite movies of the year. And true to that, the first one that I want to mention is Dave Bautista in Knock at the Cabin. I liked Knock at the Cabin. I didn't love the movie. I think it was a flawed movie, but I think that Dave Bautista is genuinely great in this film, and it shows a further growth of him as an actor.
For every no you give us, we will unleash a plague for the sins of humanity. Will you make a choice?
I mentioned the lead actors of Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. The movie was damn near stolen by one of its supporting actors, and that's Regé-Jean Page, who shows up for about 10 or 15 minutes, steals every scene he's in, and then literally just walks out of the movie. It's a hilarious deadpan performance, which is usually my favorite type of comedic performance, and Regé-Jean Page executes it perfectly.
Forge is a real son of a bitch.
So you blame his mother for his corruption?
What? No, it's an expression.
I see. I do not traffic in colloquialisms.
I mentioned the movie Air earlier. Viola Davis gave a great performance as Michael Jordan's mother with such a quiet calm to her. She has this authority that you can just feel. She doesn't need to chew the scenery because you understand that she is in charge for every second that she's on screen.
Because if he does what I think he's going to do, what you also think he's going to do, and what Michael knows he's going to do, then it won't be the NBA promoting my son. I promise you it'll be the other way around. And in that case, he deserves a piece.
In the same movie, but on the opposite side, is Chris Messina, who plays Michael Jordan's agent. He screams his way through the entire movie, which could be too over the top, but you understand that this is the character that he needs to play. He is putting out a persona just like everybody else is in this film, and I enjoyed every moment that he was on screen.
We're two out of shape, middle-aged guys. This is a little ridiculous.
I'm not out of shape. I'm in great shape. I'm in great shape. When's the last time you saw me? I'm in great shape.
Ari Aster's Beau is Afraid was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I ended up respecting it more than I liked it. It wasn't quite for me, but I can recognize that Joaquin Phoenix continues to show why he's one of the best actors working today, because even though I didn't love the film, I have to recognize his performance as being utterly brilliant, insane, whatever you want to call it. This is a movie that would never have worked if that performance hadn't worked, and I can't imagine anybody else in the lead role of this film, which means that he did a pretty good job.
I'll call the police.
No, look, I'm paying.
30 cents more.
Oh, God.
Another bonkers performance was Nicolas Cage in Renfield. The movie itself, again, was a letdown for me. I just think that it was way too generic for the premise that it had. But I enjoyed Nicolas Cage as Dracula, as always towing that line very carefully between good bad and bad good. I thought that it was good bad. And again, the moments where he's on screen were the moments in the movie that I loved the most.
I suppose that's a no as to you bringing me my dinner tonight.
No.
No?
No, not a no.
No, not no.
Evil Dead Rise was a movie I mentioned earlier that I enjoyed, even though it wasn't one of my 10 favorites, and a big reason for that is Alyssa Sutherland, who I think put in a great horror performance as the mom turned demon who terrorizes her kids. I think a lot of times watching a movie like this, you take for granted that a character's been possessed and you see it as the demon on screen, but this is a performance just like any other, and I think that Alyssa Sutherland was great. I hope that more people talk about this performance as the year goes on.
It was the perfect day, and all I could think about was how much I wanted to cut you all open and climb inside your body so that we could stay one happy family.
A movie that I didn't like beyond the first 45 minutes or so was Fast X, and what I liked really beyond that 45 minutes had almost entirely to do with Jason Momoa, who I don't know what he's doing in this film. I don't know who gave him permission to do it, but I compliment whoever it was because he just runs off with every single scene. He's just having a good time, and that's really, I think, what often makes a fun movie, actors who are having a good time. Not all the actors in this franchise look like they are. Jason Momoa obviously was.
Listen to me. Did you know that I was legally dead for 2 minutes? 2 minutes. Bob, pay attention.
Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret features great performances all around, but I thought that Abby Ryder-Fortson and Rachel McAdams were very strong as a mother-daughter duo. Of course, Abby Ryder-Fortson having to embody that very awkward stage of her life where she is.
You said that I can choose my own religion when I grow up.
Yeah, when you grow up. when you're an adult.
I'm almost 12. That's almost an adult.
But also Rachel McAdams in her own awkward stage, and I loved the sort of aimlessness that she gave her character, the idea of what she's left behind and the conflict, the tragedy in her life. There were a lot of great moments involving both characters, both together and individually, that helped make that movie one that I enjoyed as much as I did.
Okay, this is not your fault. No, that was everybody else. That was, no, it was not you. Me. No.
Glenn Howerton's performance in Blackberry is similar to Chris Messina's in Air, although this one is much more about desperation. And I loved this character who is determined to make Blackberry the next big thing, not because he wants to turn out the best phone ever made, but because he wants to prove to the world that he's actually worth something. It's there from the very beginning scenes of the movie, and it really pays off all the way to the end. It is a showy performance, but again, because you understand this character, it doesn't feel like scene stealing or scene chewing.
The deal was, I get the engineers, you shrink the data!
Are you selling more phones?
What the hell do you think I've been doing over here, Mike?
And then finally, I have to acknowledge the trio of actors from Past Lives. Greta Lee and Teo Yu are really the leads, and then John Magaro, who plays the husband of Greta Lee's character. The movie is so much about the relationship, not necessarily directly between the three of those, but between the three of these characters in different combinations, and there's a beautiful acknowledgement of that as the movie goes on. And Past Lives is another one that is a high-stakes movie emotionally, but it just goes to show that you don't need all the bells and whistles of a studio film in order to tell an effective story.
너는 나를 왜 찾았어?
12년 전에? 그게 그렇게 궁금해?
So that's a rundown of the year so far in movies. I'm sure that there are some movies that I haven't seen yet. I'm always trying to catch as many as I can that might have made that list. What are some of your favorite movies of the year so far? What are some that you're looking forward to in the second half of the year? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching the channel. Be sure to check the description for more info about our sponsors. And stay tuned right here because I'll have box office reviews, movie news, streaming charts, and more. A lot to cover as always. Thank you so much for spending part of your day here with me. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.